We are going to have a panel now about turning cliches into dollars, the kinds of things women talk about, obsess about, particularly to do with fashion and the way we all look, the kinds of things we've been talking about backstage, what to wear, what not to wear, and how you can turn that into... We all basically want to be wearing Joanna's leather trousers, which is what we've actually decided. Okay. Okay, let me introduce you first. Rochelle Behrens is the founder and CEO of The Shirt. If you don't have one, you will do by the end of this panel, because I'm going to get her to demonstrate what it actually is. Joanna Coles is the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan and a compatriot of mine. Stacy London is the co-founder and stylist-in-chief of Style for Hire. She's the author of The Truth About Style and the former co-host of TLC's What Not to Wear. Thank you, all of you, for joining me.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question I want to put to all three of you, briefly, which is, you've all made careers out of something women obsess about, and not always in the best way. Do you ever feel there's a contradiction? Stacey, let's start with you and what you've done.
Absolutely. I think in general there is a connotation with fashion that it can sort of be about the superficial or the vain or the materialistic. I started my career in fashion magazines and wound up on television, as some of you know. But I think that there is a way to look at fashion as something much bigger and much deeper, and that's sort of what I have spent my career trying to do, was to take the skill that I learned professionally from some of the great stylists in fashion magazines and apply that to the feelings that they engender. Whether it's confidence or insecurity, and how to turn what could be vilified into something truly heroic.
Joanna,
truly heroic.
Yeah,
Rather
truly,
impressive.
I think you've always been truly heroic. Isn't there a risk, though, that all we are doing effectively is perpetuating something that every teenage girl lies at night worrying about, and that it actually undermines our self-confidence?
No, not really. I mean, I think what we try to do at Cosmo, and I'm the editor of Cosmopolitan, and it's a fantastically interesting platform, is that what we try to do is reflect back to the readers what their varying obsessions are. And actually, the thing that I have done the most of since I've got to Cosmo is increase our editorial about career and about work, because it's the single thing that actually women obsess about the most right now, especially young women as they go into an incredibly uncertain job market without a lot of the skills that they need to get ahead. And I'm sure there are lots of women in this room who've hired younger women and who see that genuine skills gap. And it's everything from a generation that's grown up texting and lost the art of conversing normally, or even being on the phone and thinking that to say to someone, oh, I've sent them an email, means the work is done when it's not. But, you know, I think, that got some recognition there. And I think that what goes on in women's minds, and what's fun for me as an editor, is the whole crazy commingling of worrying about, why hasn't he called me back, or he has called me back, do I now call him back? With how do I make more money at work? How do I get my boss's job? How do I look fabulous? Is this bag really an investment bag? And I think, and it's probably not, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have it.
It is just a bag.
It is just a bag. And so I think that what one wants is a balance, so that you have a mix of all of the stuff that women think about, and you do it in a fun, lively way, and it's clear what you take really seriously and what you feel is important and fun, and will give you an elevated sense of self and power, which is style and clothing.
Okay, Rochelle, wait a sec. You moved from lobbying here in Washington, D.C., which is possibly the least sexy job that most people could think of having, and you moved into fashion, which is super sexy.
Super sexy.
So you've gone from, lobbying to fashion with no background in fashion at all. Did you feel, transitioning from one to the other, that you were getting into a world that was not always promoting female confidence?
Well, I will say this, and most of you who work in politics can understand this well. I too worked under the fluorescent lights of an office with a lot of men, and for me, dressing appropriately was paramount. And so fashion for me was never trivial. It always meant something. What I wore connoted what I felt like, what I wanted to present. And as a young professional, particularly in DC and in politics, looking professional was something that was very important. And so I attempted to do that by wearing a uniform of button-down shirts, what I thought was looking professional. And as it turned out, it was really undermining my own credibility because I was literally hanging out and busting out on the table with shirts that never fit. I wanted shirts that made me feel feminine and youthful, and not particularly masculine, but at the same time powerful. Those are all important things that you can not only connote with the work that you do, but in how you present yourself at work. And so fashion for me has never been very far apart from professionalism. And so I think there's certainly a lot of synchronicity there. In terms of the specific question,
but it's not necessarily a very sexy fashion when we think about Washington, D.C.
Right, it isn't particularly sexy fashion, but most of the country and women who work don't dress to dress sexy at work. We dress to be taken seriously. Yes. We dress to feel like ourselves. We dress to feel empowered by what it is that we're wearing, and ultimately to feel empowered by that and do better in our jobs.
I really agree with that.
There were moments, I remember I was sitting at a conference table and I put my arm up and I was hanging out and I was like, why can't I move my arm without indecently exposing myself? Like, it was so uncomfortable. I thought this was ridiculous. In terms of, sort of starting the shirt and what, the transition and how sort of dissimilar maybe Washington is from fashion, I will say that that when I started the company, that when I took sort of my idea to pattern makers in New York, it was very perplexing to them because I was doing something that was natural or different from how they had always done it. So whenever you're trying to innovate or do something a little differently, particularly in fashion, when people have come out of Parsons or FIT and have a very specific way of making fashion, when you do something that is more technical, I think sometimes it can be perplexing.
I also think that fashion is, it's a little bit of a Trojan horse. The way that you're talking about fashion as it being something sexy, I think it has a lot of different meanings and it's multi-layered. When we think about what we wear, it's exactly what you're saying, this idea of what do women want to get out of what they wear. And I think, traditionally we talk about what you wear as in, is it sexy, is it feminine? But that's sort of an antiquated view of A, what feminine is, and B, what fashion can do for us. I mean, I've said for years on What Not to Wear that you should dress the way you want the world to treat you. It is a calling card. It is like a business card. And whether that's that you want to be taken seriously and you don't want your girls hanging out on a table, you want to be able to raise your arm or raise your hand or raise your voice or whatever it is that you want to get out of your life, fashion can certainly be a part of that. And to kind of separate it from who you are and your image is a mistake. I mean, that's the easiest way to make it something superficial and, easy to poo-poo that it doesn't matter. But, fit is everything. I mean, this is why your company is so important, is because, being comfortable in what you're wearing is just as important as your clothing fitting, and also it being, beautiful colors like we have at this table, things that really flatter you and make you feel like any good hair day would. You kick back and you're like, hell yeah. And you're friendlier, you're funnier, you're flirtier, right? Am I right? So I think that it's not a trivial thing, even though we sometimes trivialize it.
And can I add to that I also think that if you don't think about fashion and you don't actually put a small amount of effort into it, you can, as I'm sure everybody has in this room, spend far too much time trying things on in the morning and going, I don't think this goes. Is it hideous? Is it fabulous? You can't tell. And the terrible sort of tyranny of not actually having a closet that goes with your life. We're all busy. Everybody's 24/7, children, big lives, working, going from day to night. And to have the understanding of what will take you through that. It's like having your armor that will take you through your life. It's absolutely key.
It's confidence and certitude.
And I also think that the point I think you're also getting at is that women talk about fashion in the way that men talk about sports. It's a connecting thing. If I don't know someone and I meet them and I go, oh my God, I love your necklace, what a fantastic bag. It's a way of having, whereas men go, oh my God, did you see the Giants last night? Can't believe it. And you're like, really? If we despite, if we talked about sports in the way that men deride women's interest in fashion, it would be interesting, but we take sports seriously, and yet fashion is an enormous business in New York. It pulls in, and it employs 175,000 people.
So none of you have any concerns about, the cliched concerns about fashion models being too tall, too thin, promoting an image that most women, if they actually tried to become that, would be sick inside a psych hospital within 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's actually a very important comment, and I just take issue with it simply because I always try to separate style, right, as something that is personal to the individual. There is no one in this room, I don't care what shape you are, what size you are, how old you are, that you can't have style. As long as you are willing to accept the body that you've been given, the shape that you have, the age that you are. The minute you try and fight against what you actually have to work with is when you look like you're trying, is when you look desperate. Okay, so to be a 12-year-old who's 6 feet tall and looks like she was stretched on a rack and 100 pounds is not realistic for most women. Whether or not you're looking at it...
You're not going to be Barbie. I mean, you're really not.
Barbie isn't Barbie.
Well, Barbie's going to fall over.
Right. And, I feel so strongly about that because I've been on both sides of this, having worked in magazines. And look, there's a reason that designers use these models. They show the clothes better because it's the clothes that you're supposed to notice, not the women. But for our lives, it's women. We want to be noticed. And so therefore, it's our job to translate what we see into what works for us. That is our job in terms of style.
Okay, but Joanna, on cosmopolitan.com at the moment, there's a headline, or was running last night, how to get sexy legs like the Rockettes. I mean, you're not going to be a Rockette. I mean, if you tell people that you have to aspire to be a Rockette, isn't that an element of aspiring to be Barbie?
Well, it is. I mean, if you go onto Men's Health or GQ, you will see, how to be diplomatic or how to get ahead at work like Rich Incognito. Joke. He's the guy from the Dolphins.
Rich Incognito with a 20-year-old girlfriend.
I haven't read the story on the Rockettes, but I think that the purpose behind that is to keep people fit. So I suspect, although I haven't read the piece, so I may be wrong, but that it's actually a workout piece.
Right.
And so actually the issue with what's going on in America is that, tragically, we have 34% of people who are morbidly obese, 66% of people who are wildly overweight still, and it's a major health issue. Diabetes, we know all this. So I think that what you're actually talking about is a workout piece.
Rather than a kind of aspirational, you want to be...
Yeah, and I mean, you're saying, come on, of course we all want legs like the Rockettes. Yeah. Do we think that people actually think they're going to get that? No, otherwise they would sue us every time they read the website.
Otherwise they'd probably be a Rockette.
Yeah. I mean, I would be happy with any high kick.
Yeah.
I mean, truly.
It's actually an interesting consideration from sort of the corporate or branding side. It's something that we as a company think about a lot. How do we photograph models wearing something that we focus on fit, and particularly for women with a bust line. And it's the question of, and I imagine a lot of much larger companies face this question as well, which is, do you show real women? Is that what you stand for? Is that who you're speaking to? Is that what your brand is all about? Or are you playing in higher fashion where having sort of a more model type body is really important to sell your clothes. So
what have you gone for with the shirt?
We've done a little bit of a happy medium. When we've chosen our models, we make sure they're thin, but we make sure that they are shapely. Somewhat approachable, but we still participate in fashion, and so it's important for us to show the clothes on the best kind of body to make the clothes look the best and to show off what they do the best.
Rochelle, before we go any further, can we have a bit of a striptease?
Demonstration.
A little bit of a... Don't you think?
I made an entire career out of showing people my chest, so here goes again.
I did warn Rochelle that we were going to do this, so for the purposes of national television.
Don't worry, I'm just going to show you. So
Joanna, you're next, okay?
I'm definitely not doing a striptease.
My parents were really thrilled they paid for college so I could do this on national TV. As we all know, shirts gape open between the buttons at the bust. I patented 2 technologies built into each one of our shirts, and it's quite simple. It's really a hidden button here and here that is sort of organic to the shirt. You can button up or unbutton as low as you wish, but it's only buttons, no snaps, no hooks, no sticky tape, all the other ways that we've tried to jerry-rig our shirts. It's gone forever. So it enables the wearer to wear her true size and not size up, as so many of us have to get a shirt that actually fits.
And this is actually not just for, I have no boobs, but this actually is true. I mean, I don't know what you find, but shirts gape.
Yes.
Especially if they're stiff cotton shirts. Whatever size you are, this is something that happens.
Well, I know when we wrote about your company, when I was editing Marie Claire, we got so much mail from people saying, finally someone's thought of a shirt for women, and it was an obvious, brilliant idea.
I think this is what's interesting about what you three are doing, is that you are taking the issues that we are all talking about, sometimes kind of almost secretively, and lifting the veil on them and saying it's okay to be having these public conversations publicly and finding solutions to things. Were you surprised by the response to the shirt?
I wasn't, because I looked around every conference room I was in and saw every woman gaping open, and my former colleagues are not going to be pleased to hear that. I don't know if any of them are here, but the men with whom I work just sort of tease me endlessly about this issue, and so it's a prevalent, well-known issue, particularly in more professional settings where women want to wear button-down shirts. I know a lot of women just stop wearing them entirely. So no, it was not surprising to me. And plus, they always say if you have a business idea, or you should look to sort of things that vex you on a daily basis to turn them into a business idea. This is something that plagued me to the point of madness and distraction. So.
I want to go ahead.
I was just thinking about the idea that it's something that's embarrassing, or something that we're trying not to tell people, or we don't want to talk about. But I think that anytime you do talk about something that you find shameful or embarrassing, you shine a light on it and you sort of take the power away from it. And if you're really brilliant, you come up with a business empire.
Brilliant, and really determined, and you keep going.
Right.
You don't give up.
I just think that there really is something to talking and communicating about the things that we find difficult. And I've certainly found that true with style. And as a communicator, as you were saying, it is a great way for women to connect to each other, but it is like a Trojan horse. It's like an iceberg. You think it's just about fashion, and then maybe you start talking about how you feel in fashion, and then you actually start talking about how you feel, and maybe you wind up with a friend you can really identify with and help make you feel more confident. I mean, there are so many things that this kind of, the tip leads to, or brilliant business ideas, that I think that, it's not something that we should just take lightly or for granted.
I want to ask you all about confidence and what you think confidence is, and how it relates to what's on the outside of us. The style and the fashion we have relates to what's on the inside of us. You've touched on this a little bit, Stacey. You are somebody who dealt with psoriasis as a child, with eating disorders as a child.
Yes.
You've grown up into an incredibly confident national fashion figure, and I want to know how what that transition was like, and what the connection was between your external style and developing an inner confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing about that is that, actually Freud even said that our self-image is connected to our body image pretty directly. And as a child, being covered in red scales, and then being anorexic, and then doubling my weight in a year, I went through a lot of different sort of unhappy kind of reflections in the mirror. And I think that my original interest in fashion really was, sort of like a turkey towards anything sparkly. Like, you just go towards it. I wanted very much to be in a world that felt perfect and beautiful, and I would be cool and in the know. But it was out of sort of, it was compensatory, in that it wasn't necessarily the best or healthiest impulse. It was that I was looking for something to make myself feel better. But what was amazing about that was that I went to work at Vogue right after I graduated from college with a degree in philosophy and literature, by the way. Talk about my parents wasting their money. But anyway, I went to Vogue, and I started to work with all these incredible photographers and these wonderful editors and stylists, and I learned this incredible skill. How to dress models in photographs, how to create a beautiful image, how to source things that I never would have known about otherwise, what couture clothing meant, the art of it, all of that stuff. And I never knew at the time why I'd studied philosophy and literature, or how I got into fashion, because what I realized when I got to sort of these upper echelons was that I still didn't really feel good. And maybe it's because I was trying to be something that I wasn't necessarily. I wasn't 6 pounds and 6 feet tall and 12. But then this amazing thing happened after being a stylist for almost 14 years. I randomly was asked to audition for a show that kind of put everything together for me. So I could take my professional skill set and my personal set of insecurity and dive into fashion in a completely different way to make it, what I consider to be a force for good and about creating self-esteem rather than tearing ourselves apart.
Joanna, does confidence drive your sense of style, or do you develop a sense of style when you are confident?
I think it's probably a combination of both, actually. And also it's about, listen, we all know confidence is really about a sort of inner energy, and sometimes you feel you have it and sometimes you don't. And often it's about things that go on around you that you can't impact. The truth is, I don't spend a wild amount of time thinking about clothes or what I look like, and thank God, frankly. And I honestly think it's very important not to have too many mirrors in one's life.
Yeah.
Because I think it's very easy to get obsessed
Or weighing
by
machines, actually. I ban them from my house.
What?
Weighing
Scales.
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 We don't have any scales in my house.
That's, no mirrors, no scales.
No mirrors and no scales.
I think that the great thing about not being 12 and getting older, and it's the miracle of getting older, is you realize the stuff that's important and the stuff that's not. And so it's enormous fun to dress well, and it does definitely make you feel more confident. But were I to have to go across the road and make some speech in hideous mom jeans and an enormous, sweatshirt, I would still be able to do it.
Well, I would kick your ass. I would be so upset with you. Look at this.
But I honestly think that, not that I have any secrets to happiness, but I do think there is a great secret to happiness in putting your makeup in the morning, leaving the house, and then not thinking about it for the rest of the day. I do think there's a great temptation for women to focus a little bit too much on what they look like and not enough on what we say, how we communicate. Of course, style is important, but I always used to say, I was on a show, a Project Runway spin-off called All Stars, and my line, which I became known for, which seemed to me a very straightforward line talking to designers, was, can you wear a bra with this? To your point, because they would create these extraordinary things out of silk, put them on these sylph-like girls who would walk down the thing. Well, they were almost 12, and you would think, but no one can wear this, because if you literally wear this, you are going to look ridiculous, and no one will take you seriously.
The one line that I remember, Michael Lewis did this big profile of Barack Obama a while ago in Vanity Fair, and the one thing I remember exactly, and I bet you every woman remembers the fact that Obama made the decision when he woke up in the morning he was going to have dark blue suits or grey suits because that was one less thing he had to think about. He had so many decisions to make that he was going to simplify his life. And I just thought, obviously we're not going to do exactly that, but I think it's a fantastic piece of advice. Well, you find the thing that suits you, you get up in the morning, you put it on, you stop thinking about it.
You find the thing that suits you, I think is, one that's part of it.
Which can take 50 years in my case.
Right, it may take some time, but I just want to reiterate, because I do think it's very important to understand that I see style, yes, as one thing. It's not the only thing. It's what you say, it's what you do, it's how you live your life. It's who you are makes up a great many things. But style is a tool, and you should see it and view it as a tool rather than a barrier to entry in terms of feeling confident about yourself. It's a tool that you can use in your arsenal to help you get to that kind of confidence. That's my point, is that it doesn't negate all the other things, your actions and your words, and you do want to find a way to become confident in what you're wearing so that you don't have to think about it all the time. But it is a tool. It is not something to be afraid of.
But I think we also all go through stages where, however confident you are, and I've just written a whole book on confidence and got my genes tested, and actually I have terrible genes for confidence. It's something I have grown my whole life. I've worked at, I've pushed myself, and I've developed confidence. But I think that for all of us, there are times when you feel more confident, as you were suggesting, and less confident. And on those times when you feel less confident or less sure of yourself, there are, you can put on whatever you put on in the morning on other days, and you still feel like crap. You just sort of do. There's this kind of there's an odd relationship that we have with how we look, I think, that is not always constant.
I agree. I actually look at, sometimes I call it, instead of getting dressed, putting on a costume. You change what you look like depending on how you feel that day. Some days I feel like a leather pant would be right. Other times, if you're doing a big presentation, there's, I think, nothing more sexy or powerful or confident than an awesome fitting black suit and a white shirt. Like, there's nothing that says, I am woman, here I am, take me seriously, and I feel good about myself in that. So, the idea that you could have this sort of uniform that you file through, I think a lot of people have had very successful careers sort of wearing their uniform and being known for that. But I love the idea that fashion is something that you sort of dress up into and assume the role of what it is that you decide to put on that day, or have it be a reflection of how you feel that day. And I think that's also something very powerful that women can do in a lot of ways better than men.
What are you going to do next, Rochelle, having changed the shirt industry?
We're working on making sure that every woman in America has the shirt hanging in her closet. It's a tall order, but we're keeping at it.
If I can make a suggestion, you should automatically go onto the pants industry.
Yes,
too,
I was going to say the pants.
That no one can get.
I agree.
It's all about fit.
It's all, so are you going to stop at shirts, or are you going to?
We have the shirt dress. I think there's the potential for adjacent categories like that in the future, but in the meanwhile, we know shirts really well, and there are a lot of ill-fitting shirts out there that need to be tossed and replaced with this one. So.
Give us some sense of how the business has grown and how many people you have working for you and the size of the business since you started it.
We have, technically, it really launched almost 3 years ago when Oprah put it on her show and named it her must-have fashion item of the year, and thus sort of
and that happened very fast for you, right? You sent the shirt in, and Oprah picked it up like within a couple days.
And the producers called me. They said, "We love the shirt. We're putting it on the show. Can you do an audience giveaway?" And I'm sitting there in my apartment, with just like a couple shirts around me, a computer. And I said, sure, I can do that. And so I had basically 5 weeks between
That was the confident response.
That was the confident response, yes. What I have learned, and I learned this in politics, is you say yes and you figure out how to do it. So I knew it was quite an opportunity, and one that I didn't want to pass up, nor did I want to squander. But I had basically 5 weeks between the time it aired and the time it shot, and between the time it aired, to go from what I say 0 to Oprah. And it still was me, just me, on that day, answering every customer service call, taking out my trash, working the website, packing boxes. So that lasted for many months. And since then, as I said, that was 3 years ago, we have a team of 12. I still do a lot of my production in the garment district in New York. I actually moved some of it overseas and really didn't feel good about it, and so brought it back to New York. And so I have a whole production team, thank you, and a studio there. And we're pursuing a lot of different, sort of diffusion opportunities with other companies to take the shirt to more and more people in more places, increasing distribution to department stores and boutiques. We still have a thriving e-commerce business. And there's also the technology which I created, which sort of can have a business of its own, which we're pursuing in terms of licensing. So there are a lot of balls in the air. I split my time between Washington and New York, where I live and where I work. And so a lot on the horizon. But it all got its start in D.C., which I think is really sort of ground zero for button-downs, and certainly was the genesis and hotbed for this kind of preoccupation of mine. I mean, I really give Washington all the credit for creating this hysteria.
Rochelle is going to transform the fashion industry in this town and make it sexier, I promise you. Okay, we have 1 minute left, and I want to ask you, Joanna, before we go, you described Cosmopolitan as a deeply feminist magazine. What does that mean today?
Well, it seems to me that it's very straightforward what it means. It means, equal pay for equal work. Which is like how I don't understand what's happened to feminism that isn't absolutely central to their platform. It means that women should have control over their own bodies and the decisions which impact their bodies. They should have access to really good healthcare, contraception, and God forbid it, should they need it, abortion rights. And it seems that they should feel confident going out into the streets that this is a country where we live with sensible gun laws.
Very good. Stacy London, Joanna Coles, Rochelle Behrens, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.